Let's get going with our main webinar this evening then. So we've got using EdShed with mixed age classes. Just check the chat before I start. Yeah. There we go. Oh, sorry. Pressing backwards instead of forwards. So age and years, I'm just going to start off with just to make sure everybody's on the same page when we're talking about things. So a lot of my teaching career has been in England. Some of it was in Scotland. I've worked with doing training with schools in Wales, but I haven't had that international experience. So I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same age children when I'm talking about these year groups here. So if I'm talking about age 3 or 4, that'll be nursery children. Ages 4 to 5, that's reception. That's normally before your spelling shed. Spelling shed normally runs from stage 1, which for us is equal to year 1, which is from when the year children are 5 to 6. And it keeps going up 1 year at a time, all the way up till 10 and 11, so year 6. So I've just put some other different school types and things like that on there, including key stages, just so that we're familiar with all that terminology if you describe it slightly differently at your school or setting. So I will be talking about the key stages a lot as well. So year 1 and 2 for us, so that's when children are 5 to 7, is key stage 1 or KS1. Year 3 and 4 is lower key stage 2. And year 5 and 6 is upper key stage 2. So you will see me refer to these bits quite a lot. Now, we do get lots of different types of mixed age classes. A lot of them are just general, those in those phases like we've just talked about. So year 1 and 2 together, year 3 and 4 together, and year 5 and 6 together. And that is one way of having the mixed ages, but it's not the only way, and it depends on where you are and what your school makeup is as to what kind of mix that you get. I have seen some that cross phases, like reception in year 1, year 2 and year 3, year 4 and year 5, and also year 6 and year 7 mixed in some middle schools. So you've got lots of different things going on in there. But you might also have more than 2 year groups. So you could have reception 1, 2, and I've done that mix before. 3, 4, 5 can be a common one. 4, 5, 6, I've seen that in a primary school as well. And year 3, 4, 5 and 6 all together, which I have taught once in quite a rural school. So you can get lots of different mixes going on there. There are some positives to having a mixed age class, a lot of peer support, and often the oldest children get this sense of responsibility and younger children have those more aspirational models for that we're looking towards. It can allow quite a nice cross of pedagogical approaches spanning between the stages, especially if you get those cross phase mixes like year 2 and year 3. We're bringing some of that key stage 1 pedagogy into the lower end of key stage 2, and it just makes a nicer transition. And it also helps you as teachers know the previous year content because you've taught it as well, so you know how it was taught, and that can really help too. And also it enables schools to thrive in lower population areas such as rural communities, which is really, really important, and they have so many other benefits with that as well. But it can be quite challenging to teach mixed age classes. You might have to juggle 2 curriculums. You might even have to do 3. So you're thinking about all the small steps that go with each of those different year groups. It can give you a lot more timetabling challenges than just straight year groups. And parents and children seem to get this idea sometimes that it's about ability grouping. So if you've got a year 3 and 4 class, sometimes the year 4 parents feel a bit like, oh, but they're with a lower year group and things like that. And it's often not, that's not why we've done it. But parents and children can still think that. So I do often get asked, what is the solution? How can I deliver spelling shed or deliver spelling teaching to a mixed age class? But unfortunately, it's not as simple as me giving one solution, because there are so many different perspectives that are unique to your setting. So the best way to teach mixed year groups will be unique for your class and your school, because it depends what I'm talking about. The answer to what's the best way to teach year 1 and 2 mixed will be different to what's the best way to teach 5 and 6 mixed, or 2 and 3 mixed, or if I've got more than one year group in there as well. So there's lots of different things that go in there. And that year group mix is just the start. I always had frustration when I was doing mixed age classes with maths planning, and they offered mixed year group planning, but it just missed the mark. Either there was one of my year groups that it didn't really account for, or it was just a little bit too weak in, or I may end up with a different mix. So there might have been year 1 and 2 mixed planning, but I had a year 2 and 3, so that wouldn't have worked. There's also the number of adults that you have available for teaching spelling in your timetable. That can have a big influence as well on what strategy you choose. And that's before you even start thinking about the individual children in the cohort that you've got in your class, because that might also give you some different strategies. Now, in general, with Spelling Shed, we recommend teaching to the year group. So if you are in year 2, we recommend teaching stage 2. So if you've got a year 1 and 2 mix, we'd recommend teaching the year 1 children stage 1 and the year 2 children stage 2, and using intervention to try and help plug the gaps rather than having year 2 children in the year 1 group grouped by ability. So that can be a little bit of a juggle. I think it's really good to go back to what the curriculum looks like when we're looking at things like this. So you'll see here, we've got the bit at the top, that's all the English. You can see Key Stage 1 Year 1 is separate, and Key Stage 1 Year 2 separate. And then Lower Key Stage 2 is grouped together, and so is Upper Key Stage 2. That's what you do in your wider writing lessons, usually with text-based learning and things like that. Then we've got English Appendix 1, which is the spelling appendix, and that again lists the sections to be covered in each year. That is what the Spelling Shed scheme covers. So your main spelling scheme will cover all of those objectives in there. Then you've got Appendix 2, which is the vocabulary, grammar and punctuation. That is what the grammar section of Spelling Shed covers. So all of the grammar and punctuation resources in there will be covered by those sort of activities. So it is really important to make note of those year groupings in that curriculum. It talks about the work for year 1 and the work for year 2 being separate, but your lower key stage 2, so year 3 and 4, and your upper key stage 2, year 5 and 6, are grouped together, so they can be completely interchangeable, but year 1 and 2 aren't able to be. They're far too progressive for it to be able to work like that. So the main outline of the strategies are whether you are going to teach the year groups separately or teach the year groups together. If you're teaching them separately, you could have one strategy with multiple adults, or if sometimes you might only have one adult available for your spelling teaching, so you might have to use a timetabling way to juggle that. The other alternative is teaching the year groups together using a rolling curriculum. You can double up your curriculum and you can use a linked curriculum as well. So these are the strategies that I'm going to go through today. So first off, teaching the year groups separately if we've got multiple adults. So you could have one adult teaching each year group. You've got to make sure the class teacher knows the progress and the children's attainment just as much, even if it's the group that they aren't teaching at that moment. And all staff delivering it should be sufficiently trained in the spelling and the pedagogy that you're using. So I had this with a year 1 and year 2 mix in a small village school, and spelling was my focus. So I made sure that when I did my timetabling for spelling, it was in the morning when I had that extra adult. And we did, I'd do 3 weeks where I was teaching the year 1 children and my teaching assistant would be teaching the year 2 children. And then we would swap over as well, but we'd also meet during planning time to talk about those difficulties that we'd had with spelling, any objectives that went well, and what particular children were talking about. So in that case, I just followed our medium-term progression in the order that it said on the tin. So stage 1, we're doing words with double F, double L, double S as their first objective. Stage 2, we're doing words with DGE representing the J sound there. So that one's quite a nice and easy way to do it. Probably the easiest if you have got 2 year groups, and it is if you've got in that look of having more than one adult to be able to deliver it, which we don't always have. If you're doing it separately, you still want to teach the year groups separately, which, like I say, in Key Stage 1, you really need to, but you've only got one adult. You might need to do the teacher-led spelling lesson and the other group working independently. That independent bit might be on spelling, or it might be on something else. So if you've taught your spelling lesson, you can set the children off to do the other bit independently while you teach the next group. So that can work quite well with the structure of a 30-minute main teach and 2 15-minute practices as your model of the sessions that you're using. So with that year group that I was talking about with year 1 and 2, later on in the year, I actually lost that ability to have that extra adult. So for that same class, I needed to adapt it to this type of structure. So they still got that separate input, but they were having independent practice as well without that second adult. So here I'd teach my year 2s first. And while I was teaching my year 2s, I would be asking my year 1 children to do some letter formation and handwriting practice of things that had already been taught. So I'm not introducing anything new. And I tried to link it to the spelling objective a little bit if I could, but otherwise it was just an independent activity of something else. Then once I taught my year 2s, the stage 2 content, I gave them their spelling work to work with, and then I moved over to teaching my year 1s. I didn't do it all at the same time in like 1 hour. So I did the year 2s in the morning, first thing, and then I did it again after lunch. I did another session there. So that can be one way of doing it. Before I move on to how you teach year groups together, I'm just going to check the chat box really quickly. See if we've got any questions. Feel free to pop them in. I will keep checking as we go through. Okay, right, next. We might not always have that ability to teach the year groups separately. We really need to in Key Stage 1, but in Key Stage 2, we are not pushed to do so. So you don't have to do that so much. So the most popular, I'd say, is the rolling curriculum. This is where you teach one stage 1 year, then alternate with the other stage. So I had a year 3 and 4 class at a school in a town near me, and I did a year 4 1 year, and then the following year it was on the plan, the rolling curriculum, to teach the year 3. I wasn't in the same year group that year, but the other teacher that would have done the following year, they would have delivered the stage 3 spelling. That really suits lower Key Stage 2 or upper Key Stage 2 interphase mixes. It can be a little bit difficult in the first year, as it might need a combined approach. So you might have noticed I said I started with the year 4. That was because that had been running for a little while already. So they didn't need to, they'd had the stage 3 the previous year, and it keeps rolling like that. However, if you are, for example, particularly in year 5 and year 6, and you're just starting this approach, if you go straight in with doing the stage 6, then the year 6s might have missed some of that year 5 content, depending on what they had when they were in year 5. So you might need to use a combined approach just for the first year that you're introducing this rolling curriculum, and then you can go to this nice, easy model. So yeah, stage 3, 1 year, and then the next calendar year, do stage 4, and then alternate. Now, what you can do if you're in one of those transition years is do a double curriculum. So basically you're teaching 2 spelling lessons per week where both years do both. So I teach stage 3 and stage 4, or stage 5 and stage 6. It can require a lot of curriculum time, and be cautious on which objectives you use. Don't do 2 things that are too heavy at the same time. You might want to swap them about. But it can be effective for those transitions between different schemes, or plugging gaps and catching up if spelling is your biggest priority. I did do this when I was on a long-term supply role once with a year 5 and year 6 class, because for that school and that cohort of children, this was a particular area of weakness. So their maths was quite strong, their writing was okay, apart from the spelling and the writing, and all the other elements they were fairly strong on, but spelling was a particular weakness. So dedicating this much time to it made a lot of sense, whereas it maybe wouldn't if you've got multiple areas that you're working on or it's not a particular weakness for you. So yeah, in the morning I'd do the stage 5. I'd start the morning with the stage 5 ones, and then I'd finish the morning just before lunch with the stage 6 ones, so that they had that exposure to both of them. And I did a little and often model with that. So I did 3 little spelling sessions for each stage per week on a Monday, a Wednesday and a Friday with that one. And the final one is a linked curriculum where you're teaching the year groups together. So this is where you have similar objectives taught with differentiated lesson content. And that is best for cross-phase mixes. So if you've got like year 2 and year 3, year 4 and year 5, things like that. They don't always match, so you might need to combine it with some other strategies, such as teaching the year groups separately with the one adult approach. And it does require more preparation time on your part as a teacher, because you want to sit down with your medium-term plans for all the year groups you've got. So for example, here, year 2 and year 3, and start to match some of the objectives together. So sometimes it's not an easy match, but here for the week 1, I picked ones where the digraph was representing a normally simple sound, but in these ones it was a little bit of an unusual one. They're different digraphs and different phonemes, but it's a similar concept. Then in year 2 and year 3, you've actually got a couple of objectives that completely overlap, such as words ending in LE. So that's one I matched up, and the same for words ending in AL. And all the other similar ones in there. And then for challenge words, they nicely match up because they just have the different challenge words within that. So here is some of that content from the stage 2, words ending in LE. So looking at this week's words and what pattern they have. And there would be absolutely no harm in year 2s and year 3s looking at both the year 2 and the year 3 examples, because we're just giving them more and more examples of words with this pattern that we're trying to learn. So I'd introduce those too. I can do a little bit of the etymology still. I wouldn't do loads, so I'd pick out a couple of bits of etymology. I wouldn't do all the year 2 and all the year 3 etymology unless I was extending my lesson significantly. I can work with a morphology matrix still, because I can change that word in the middle to other words that were on this list for each one, but also that word is relevant for both year groups, so that still works really nicely to work with both year groups. And then when it comes to the word sorts, you can set each of the children off to do the different word sorts with their particular words for that week. So that's just an example of how you can combine your PowerPoints. I just copy and pasted the slides out of each one for Spelling Shed. If you are doing that though, if you're moving any objectives about, please make sure you check for any progressive elements. So for example, in that year 3 one, you've got words ending in LE, and then you've got words ending in LY where the base word ends in LE. Clearly you want to do the LE lesson first, so make sure you've still got that first and things like that. Check the starters. You might need to change some of your starters because they're often linked to prior learning. So if you've moved objectives about, your starters might not match with the previous one. It can just be a case of swapping them about, or you can just change your wording on your starters and say it's maybe not the previous lesson, but it is something that we've done before. And make sure you plan out the full year. Otherwise, you might end up with objectives that don't fit well at the end. So I know I've made this mistake before where I picked all the bits that match nicely early in the year, and then towards the end of the year I was really struggling for bits that worked well together, and it got a little bit tricky. So make sure you do the full year of progression at the start, otherwise you might end up in a bit of a sticky situation with them. I've got some notes on independent time as well. Don't leave any objective up to chance. So independent time is about practice. It's not about the children teaching themselves something on their own. So, for example, I gave the year 1 example earlier, which was something they've done in phonics before, letter formation link to that. I wouldn't just say, oh, here's your spelling words for this week. Can you do this activity with it, without having introduced it and without that teaching first. Make sure you check on progress at regular intervals and ensure that the practice that they're getting in independent time is valuable. It's not just filler activities in there. Now, the final thing is, if we've got more than one year group mix, you might need to combine a couple of these options. So for year 3, 4, 5 and 6, so I had a class that was like that in the Lake District. There was 5 year 3s, 5 year 4s, 5 year 5s and 1 year 6, which was a bit lonely when he was sitting a SATs paper. But what I did was I had another adult with me for that. So I did one adult was teaching the year 3 and 4 with the rolling curriculum, and the other adult was teaching the year 5 and 6 with a rolling curriculum. So year 3 and 4 went off to do stage 3. Year 5 and 6 went off to do stage 5, and then the following year, the year 3 and 4 would have done stage 4, and the year 5 and 6 would have done stage 6. So it swaps. And we also swapped adults each half term there. So instead of every 3 weeks, it was every half term. The other example I've got is year 2 and 3. You might start with one adult. So you can do a linked curriculum as far as possible throughout the year, like that example I gave earlier. But then you might want to switch to separate year group teaching with some more independent time a bit later on with the objectives that you've got left. And that also works a bit better later in the year when the children have got more things that they can be independent with. Now, a lot of this detail is in our new resource on mixed age classes. So you might have seen this before if you've emailed in asking about mixed age classes. We've now got this on our website. So that QR code there will link you straight to it. If you want to scan that, it will take you to the page where you can download that. Or I've left the hyperlink at the bottom. It is on our Spelling Shed resource page, so you will be able to find it. If you go to spellingshed.com and then go into the resources, it will be there. It is a completely free resource, so you don't need to have your Spelling Shed subscription to download that. You can download it anyway. And I think it would be helpful even if you're not using Spelling Shed as your scheme, even if you're using other places. So I mentioned at the start about the different training opportunities with Leading the Way to Successful Spelling and Spelling Unpacked. So make sure you check out those if you're interested. We do also deliver a whole school CPD, which can be made bespoke to your school with lots of different units on subject knowledge and curriculum. We do talk about some of this with mixed age classes in some of these elements as well, particularly with curriculum and differentiation. Make sure you're following us on social media as well. There are our links to our Facebook, Instagram, X account and YouTube too. Okay, if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. I'll stop sharing now so that I can see them easily. The resource link, yeah, I'll pop that back up. Okay, I'll just get it back onto that slide. Here it is. I hope that QR code worked because I don't think I checked it when I made it. I'm hoping it works. There we go. Yes, it does. Please, that works. Okay, I'll leave that up for a moment. I hope it's still showing there. If you do get any questions after the webinar, you can always email in. So training@edshed.com comes to the training team, or support@edshed.com goes to our support team. We'll swap it over if you get the wrong one. We'll sort you out with where you need to be. Okay, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. Okay, if no one's got any more questions, I will be turning the meeting off in a minute. So if you did have anything and you were typing, I'm really sorry. Please feel free to email it to us instead. Thank you.